Welcome to Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yen. I'm usually the comics half of this show, and with me, as always, is...
the sans half of the show, Nat Nathaniel Ma, the Natster, Nada de Coco.
And today, you can actually call me Miles Sans Tay, which only makes sense if you know my full name is Mile Yen Tay, because we have a special guest with us today. We actually have the return of the reigning champ, the best to ever do it, coming in from the top rope. It's the one, the only, Beth Hetland.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm the comics part of this podcast.
We are so delighted to have you back, Beth.
I'm so delighted to be here. I'm so happy to be back, and I'm just tickled. I'm tickled.
Speaking of which, what's been tickling you lately, Beth? What's something you've been enjoying?
I just blasted through the 5th book in the Hawthorne and Horowitz murders. It's a murder mystery. I do them as audiobooks, but it's by Anthony Horowitz. He has a murder mystery series where he's a character in the books, and I really like them, and he partners with like an ex-PI detective guy who's like kind of gruff around the edges, and they're really fun. But so the one I just listened to is called Closed to Death, which I really enjoyed.
Are they like a little camp, or are they very serious? Like, because he's in them, right? It'd be funny if he was in them and then he was like, and this guy's the coolest dude ever.
No, that would be really funny, but no, they're very, I mean, they take the murder mystery serious in that it's a murder mystery, but it's as campy as murder mysteries should be, I think. And because he's in it, it's very meta. He's in it as a writer of Alex Rider series and is looking for something different to do. So now he's working on murder mysteries.
Do you know what that reminds me of, Beth? Did you ever read Powers?
No.
So Powers is a Brian Michael Bendis sort of superhero noir comic. Right? It's about two cops in a superpowered world. And there's an issue where there's a ride-along, where there's a comic book writer. And I can't remember whether it was Bendis himself. I think it may not have been Bendis. But somebody comes on a ride-along, and then the whole issue is them talking meta about making comics.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'll have to check that out.
Nat, what have you been enjoying lately?
Oh, great question, Yen. Funny you should mention, and not just because, we were about to speak to Beth on the podcast and I needed to make sure that I had done my required reading, but I recently, i.e. last night, just finished reading The Wonderful Tender by Beth Hetland. Look, it's right behind Beth as well if you're watching video. Come on, give it a little pointy point. There we go. Beth, I just have one question for you.
I hope it's why.
Oh, you gotta let me ask it myself.
Can I say the thing Nat texted me today? The
yes,
question
please.
he asked?
So Yen texted me, did you read Tender? And I was like, yes. And then I said,
what's wrong with Beth?
Nat, first of all, I'm so flattered that you read a comic of your own accord, not for a podcast. I mean, it's kind of for the podcast, but kind of not. And also, I'm just baffled at how sans comics knowledge you are in the fact that I talked to you about Black Hole and you're like, what's wrong with Beth?
No, but this was on a different level. I'm sorry.
All I have to say is buckle up for today. Okay.
Oh,
if you think
brother.
yeah.
Oh, brother.
But
how do
also,
I quit?
Thank you so much.
How do I quit? Are you saying thank you for saying what's wrong with Beth? Is that the kind of compliments you want?
That's very kind. Yes.
Oh,
thank you.
You're so welcome.
Well, I have to self-servingly say it's been making a lot of the best of 2024 lists, and I'm incredibly flattered. So
well deserved. Well deserved.
Absolutely.
All right, Ian, what do you like? What are you into?
What do you read?
Wait, okay, the question is not what am I into?
It's what media are you enjoying? What are you into?
What's your type?
So last night I just watched Bong Joon-ho, writer-director of Parasite. I watched his debut film, Barking Dogs Never Bite. I think that's going to maybe tee me into today because that's a weird, messed up movie. Have you seen it, Beth?
I have, yes. I love Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah, he's great. Nat, I don't think you could watch this movie. The amount of violence there is to words. Get ready for my next word, Nat. You're going to hate it.
Okay, dogs.
Dogs.
Yeah, it's rough.
But I was watching it with the full cinema of people at the Singapore International Film Festival, and there were some moments when you thought, in like half the audience, you could tell who had dogs because they'd just go, no, that were audible, no.
Beth, all I'll say about Tender, going back, you just be glad I don't have cats. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
That is truly one of the biggest things that people are very upset about with me. And I feel like, unlike cinema and in a little bit different vein as comics, is like, it's just lines on paper, right? Like, it's not, they're not real. It's just drawings. Well, that's great. These are good media updates, especially for today. Fellas, are you ready?
Take us
in,
Are you
Beth.
ready
for today?
Ready to dive in, Beth. Tell us what's going on.
I'm so excited that we're going to be reading Junji Ito Uzumaki. This is a beast of a manga, y'all. We're not going to read the whole thing, of course, even though, once again, I just would like the record to show my displeasure for not forcing you to read the whole thing. But I've overcome that challenge to select some sections of this for us to read. But I'm not even going to intro it yet, but like, what do you know about this?
You might as well be just scatting, like in jazz, you know?
Oh, okay.
That's what it is.
A Junji Ito.
Yeah, that's it. That's good. That's good. Uzumaki,
Yeah.
Kiki, Uzumaki. I mean, I look at the word Uzumaki and the word that comes to my mind is umebochi, which is like the plum.
Oh, okay. Nat knows
Sorry.
nothing. Yen, what do you know about Junji Ito and or Uzumaki?
Being somebody who reads comics and thinks about comics and gets talked to about comics, I've definitely heard the name Junji Ito a lot of times. And this is actually not one of those that I haven't read like out of ignorance. This is a one that I've veered away from because I've seen pages of Uzumaki, I've seen pages of Junji Ito's work, and it all freaks me out so much. And I often read, most of the time I read manga, specifically manga, before going to sleep.
Ooh, this is not a bedtime one.
And so there were many opportunities where I was like, oh, I could borrow it. And then no, I'm going to read it before going to sleep. And that's really, I read Berserk, a lot of Berserk before going to sleep, which is just a terrible, terrible idea. And so after Berserk, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this again. I'll get to it some point. And lo and behold, the perfect moment has approached. Also, Nat, do you remember that we've talked about this comic before?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We've talked about
just
how
checking.
we would never do it on this show, and now it's coming back to me. And also, why did we have to do this recording at 9:30 p.m. Singapore time?
Because this is the most important time to experience Uzumaki. Like, genuinely. Hopefully you're in your homes completely alone and that it's very, very late. And if you can create kind of a whining soundtrack in your area, that would be really excellent. If not, I can give you a sound bath.
Yeah, I think while we're reading it, Beth, you just stay on mic and just... Oh, I don't like that at all.
I'm just kidding. Okay. On this podcast, you've read some manga. Very, very small amount of manga on this podcast. So now, history lesson, what do you remember about manga? And specifically, the types of manga.
Well, there are the isekais.
Come on.
Okay.
There are the shonens. There are the shoujo.
Oh!
Yeah, nailed it.
Which are for young boys and girls, respectfully.
Yes, correct.
Respectively.
Respect-
But also
Respectively.
respectively.
Respectfully, shoujo.
I'm just not in the right frame of mind anymore. You guys have scared the shit out of me, and I'm just like...
And we haven't even read the comic.
I don't even want to do this. Okay, yeah, so shonens, shoujos, show me more manga.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So there's also one that Yen was referencing that, shonen was for young boys and shoujo is for young girls, and josei was for slightly older young women, right? And then seinen, right? This is for like older quote unquote young men. But honestly, seinen has really expanded to just mean like adult. So this is like adult graphic novels essentially. And that is where Uzumaki lies, is that this is an adult graphic novel. It was originally published as like short little bursts. So again, thinking about those little floppies essentially, and like, America would be just like a couple of chapters or an issue at a time that's doled out over a period of time.
Was there a seinen jump?
Similar, yeah. So this one was called Big Comic Spirits.
Oh, okay.
I love that
Which
name.
I hate that name. But I also
That is my
love it.
new handle on every platform you can
Spirits
find
At
me.
Big Comic Spirits.
Okay, I changed my mind. I love that name now. So the kind of magazine that was, or the publication that was, had like all kinds of stuff. So it had like erotica things, as well as like comics that were maybe a little more spooky. It also had like articles, you know, kind of your Men's Health scenario, but way
That's
more
hilarious.
fun.
Men's Health.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what it was. So this behemoth, I'm trying to find the last page count wise, but the page numbers drop off at a certain point. So I'm going to say, I think it's over 600. But okay, but think about this. So this is a huge, massive amount of work. This was created in 1 year.
No way.
Wait,
Yes.
Uzumaki was done
Is
in
it
1
like
year?
600 blank
98.
pages?
1998. No. 1998 to 1999 is the publication time for this.
One
and the
artist?
creation time for this. This is one artist. Well, okay, so in manga style, oftentimes an artist has many assistants.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
This was fairly early in Junji Ito's career, so I would assume he would have at least 1 or 2 assistants helping him out with this. I don't know for a fact if he did or not. He's credited as being the mangaka for this. So it's not like there's a collaborator, there's not somebody else writing. It's all kind of him and then maybe people helping out with like backgrounds or things like that. So this is huge. Like Junji Ito himself is known as kind of the like king of horror in a lot of ways. And he's specifically influenced and produces work that is like cosmic horror. Now, what do we know about cosmic horror? Have we heard this before?
I love it. That's what I know. I love cosmic horror.
I've never heard of this genre before.
Eldritch,
Like what? Like space horror?
indescribable, existential.
Well, I wore a themed outfit today for those of
that
you who
is-
are watching. So cosmic horror it's eldritch. It's really the horror of the unknowable. And so it's like this kind of existential horror. It's oftentimes thinking about things that are beyond humankind or things that you can't really comprehend. It's incomprehensible, unknowable horror that like H.P. Lovecraft is like cosmic horror. And Junji Ito's really influenced by Lovecraft.
Nat, we've actually had a reference to Eldritch this season, which was in the nice house on the lake when
yes.
Bill de Blasio's Twitter account says, "Look behind the fire. There is something behind the fire." And that is definitely a reference to cosmic horror, that the idea that there's something so terrible out there that by like perceiving it, you will go insane.
Right.
So this kind of horror, and specifically this kind of horror that Junji Ito goes on to make in his wide catalog, is that it's different than movie, jump scare, slasher. It's the kind of horror that like creeps into you, that is like slow, that's quiet oftentimes. It's atmospheric. And then
The listener can't tell Nat is dying. The light is leaving Nat's
I have
eyes
to
with
work
each
tomorrow,
additional
Beth.
descriptor.
I have to wake up and go to work, and to wake up, I have to sleep.
well, here's the deal. You may not sleep ever again. I hope you enjoyed your last night's sleep. And the other thing that Junji Ito does specifically is that he's also known as a master of body horror. So not only is it creeping dread externally, but it's creeping dread internally as well. So
Nat is so upset right now.
I'm going to need to have a word of our producers after this.
let me give you the premise. I haven't even told you what this is
Yeah,
about
let's
yet.
go,
Are you
let's go.
ready?
Let's
Because
go.
here's the thing. I think so. I'm sort of building you up for all these different types of descriptions and words, but the actual premise of this story is a town that is haunted by a spiral.
Okay. I know spirals.
Yeah.
Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah. That's what the word Uzumaki means, is it's a spiral. Okay. So it's just called spiral.
Okay.
Not so bad, right?
That sounds friendly.
I like
Yeah.
spirals.
I like
There's
spirals.
worse things to be haunted by.
So we're going to do something a little bit different here on Comic Sans because once again, I'm in charge. So these are my rules. Ready?
man.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is you two fine folks are going to read the first chapter of Uzumaki, but you're going to stop when you get to the phrase, "We found this large tub."
I'm so excited, man. I'm so excited.
Tub of what? Tub of what?
It's just a tub. It's not.
I'm
It's just a tub.
delighted.
But things I want you to pay attention to, okay? I want you to pay attention to his drawing style. It's really, really specific. It is a very scratchy, like heavily rendered, lots of like textured kind of drawing style. And then I also want you to pay attention to just kind of that thing, like we said, the like creeping dread of this. So we're going to do 2 reading breaks. So after this first one, you're going to have read chapter 1, which is just like the intro to the story, kind of get us the characters. We're going to do a short recap. And then we are going to read the last 2 pages of that story together. This is a spooky story, and I want to be here for Nat, okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you, Beth.
I don't buy that for a second.
I don't understand. And then we're gonna take another reading break, and you 2 are gonna read 2 more chapters, and we're gonna talk about those and do kind of our usual Comic Sans thing. Okie doke?
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay. Nat, do you need a stuffy to hug while you read?
I'll be okay.
Do you need a puppy? There's no
I'm
doggies.
Yeah,
There's
where
no
are your
doggy
dogs?
harm.
That's good.
No animal
That's good.
harm in this.
That's good. You know,
Yeah.
we love to hear that. No, I'm ready. I'm brave. I'm a grown man.
That's right, you are.
That's right, I am. I've dealt
right,
with
you
spirals
are.
before.
Nothing says I'm a grown man like saying I'm a grown man.
I'm a grown man. Well, let's all be grown men and let's go read, okay?
Ready.
Okay, we'll be right back, everyone.
Okay, fellas, welcome back. How are we doing?
I don't want to come back.
But you did.
Or rather, I don't want to go back and continue reading from what I imagine is going to happen next.
Okay, well, yeah, and I'd actually love to hear a quick recap of what you just read up until we found this large tub.
Okay, so we have Kiri, who lives in this town, and her friend Shuichi, who is returning. And her friend Shuichi's father has become obsessed with spirals. Kiri's talking to Shuichi about it, and Shuichi's becoming increasingly depressed and despondent about it because his father's acting more and more strangely, including becoming obsessed with spirals in his food, in the bathtub, and he says his eyes can spin as well in spirals. Where we are at now is after an act of contortion using his tongue. The next thing we know, Shuichi's father has passed away, and we are at the funeral where Kiri is trying to console Shuichi, who she is now learning has lied about the means of his father's demise. Which takes us to this tub.
Right, we've just finished the funeral, and Shuichi said that's not what happened. He didn't fall down a flight of stairs.
That's what they've been telling everyone, but the reality is...
They came home, Shuichi and his mom. They're looking for him, and they find this large tub. We're going to read these last 2 together, okay? So I guess maybe, are there any predictions of what you think you're about to see?
I think we're going to see a human body contorted into a spiral inside this tub.
Okay.
Ditto.
Okay. All right, well, let's find out.
And for the listener, this is Shuichi recounting to Kiri.
We'd never seen it before. It was sitting there, in the middle of his study, close up on this tub. I wonder what this is. And they reach for the lid. And here we go. Page turn.
Oh, no! No!
I am delighted to say that, listeners, these 2 are correct. This is...
No, but this is so far worse than what I imagined.
No, I think, what's really horrifying about it is how anatomical it is. You can imagine a body curled up in a ball, but the way this is spread out across like the 4 limbs, like the hands, the centerpiece of the spiral is the hands clasped together, and the outer ring is the feet. But the tongue is still coiled. Everything is just really compressed and coiled, and you can even see,
there's a nipple.
His nipple. Exactly what I was about to say. It's terrible. You can see the lines of his rib cage.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, he's really, really gone incredibly past the deep end, right? Like, he has discovered that not only can he make spirals in his food and in his bathwater, and then his eyes are rotating, and then this tongue contortion act, to the point where he literally has crushed his body and broken his bones to make this shape, that the depth of this obsession is so palpable that he could withstand and in fact end his own life by cramming into this spiral tub.
Oh, brother. Nat, do you still have the page open or have you like pushed it aside?
No, I pushed it aside. I'm on the next page.
I still have it open. I'm just looking at this while Beth is talking.
I just want to jump in here to say very quickly. I know we're going to talk more about the comic and later on, but I just want to, break up the horror and shock and horror of everything we've been doing so far to say that I actually haven't really enjoyed the art style so far. More so than the other mangas we've read, because I feel like this is quite different from the typical manga art style.
Yes.
Like we're not seeing
This is hyper detailed, I would say.
Yeah,
Correct.
but also just like we're not seeing those, big droplets of water and big eyes, and it's just not what you expect from, not what I expect from a manga. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Absolutely. Junji Ito is really redefining this genre and really making big strides through his own visual language, right? Like he's creating these hyper realistic illustrations to the point where they're so realistic they become grotesque, right? This is like the kind of realism where you're like, ew, I don't need to see that. And at the same time, I think he's also bringing in like a lot of symbolism in the way that he's making marks. So I would encourage you as you read the next two chapters to pay attention to the amount of spirals hidden amongst the pages, because they are aplenty. So the next chapter we're going to read is chapter 9, The Black Lighthouse. And then you're going to read chapter 13, which is just called The House. And a little bit of info between what you just read and where we're about to be is that each chapter is broken up by a different horrible thing that happens in this town. All of this is in this town. It is a variety of different characters. Some of them are the characters we've met. In particular, in The Black Lighthouse, the cover image of that has a young woman with short hair. That is still Kiri. In a chapter that we did not read, that I think is important to point out, her hair becomes spirals and tries to kill her.
Oh,
and
dear.
So, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hate it when that happens. Yeah.
Classic hair, sentient hair. That chapter is actually extremely pivotal, but I just want to point out that is Kiri. She has a younger brother, Mitsuo, who you're going to meet in The Black Lighthouse. Shuichi is still around. He's still a part of this. You will see him again. But mostly we're hanging out with Kiri and Kiri's family.
Okay, so chapters 9 and 13, is that correct?
That's correct.
I am steeled. I am girded.
Okay, just to prepare me, Beth, does it get better or worse from here?
I'm not going to answer that.
Come on, Nat. Think a little, though.
Remember, that's where it started.
No shot. You think chapter 1 is the scariest chapter?
Maybe.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they're like, la la la, spirals.
A man can dream. A grown man can dream.
Welcome back.
I hate you, Beth.
All right, well, we're gonna jump right into our 5 words. Last time I was here, I made you alternate and share your 5 words. I feel like we're still gonna operate that way.
We can do that. Yeah. Disease.
All right, disease. Okay.
I'm going to say it and I'm going to quickly clarify. Boring, but the verb, not the descriptor, right? So to bore into something, to spiral, to screw into a thing. Yeah, basically drilling in.
Yeah, I love that. Great. Nah?
Carnage.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Intricate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Are you ready for my last one? My last one's good.
Yeah, hit me.
This is a full-on hyphenation. Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why aren't people leaving the town?
For the audio listener, Nat looked down as if he was reading as if he wrote that down and needed to refer to it to say the whole thing.
Let me check my cards.
Why are they sticking around? What's wrong with these people?
Should we do the recap?
I love that. Yeah, that's a perfect play. First of all, I love that extra hyphenated. Why are these people not leaving this town? This is a great word. And also, let's hit a recap. So chapter 9, The Black Lighthouse.
I'm doing 9. You do 13.
Okay, but you go fast.
Okay. So in chapter 9, it's about this lighthouse that just mysteriously, it's apparently it's been out of service for forever, but now it's come on by itself, and everyone's just like really enamored by it, and they're just standing there watching the light, and it goes and it spins and it spins and it spins, the light from the lighthouse. people who have been watching the lighthouse begin to start spinning around in circles as they walk, and still no one leaves the town. And then Mitsuo, Kiri's brother, is as little boys are, is intrigued by this lighthouse and wants to go check it out. And so he and his friends, against his family's wishes, goes to the lighthouse and they see the doors open and they go up. And they're so stupid. And Kiri goes after them and she's like, "What are y'all doing? Come back." They run up the spiral staircase. It feels like forever. The spirals begin to appear on the walls and the ceiling, and then they encounter some skeletons, some lovely skeletons. Two of the boys are terrified, and then she goes up, and Mitsuo and another boy are just sitting at the top of the lighthouse, and there's this thing. It looks like a creature, but I think it's just she says it's the Fresnel lens of the light in the lighthouse lens that is like melted. It's just terrifying.
Can you describe, you said it looks kind of like a creature. What would you typically find in a lighthouse? And then what are you looking at here? Can you give us some description?
I guess typically in a lighthouse you'd find it's just like a light bulb, a big light bulb.
A light.
Yeah.
It's in the name, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I've never been in a lighthouse.
A big honking light bulb. Usually a lot of mirrors to help with the amplification of the light, right?
Okay. Yeah, and this one is just a big melted ice cream.
We're also lighthouse fans.
Sorry, I was like, Nat said okay as if I've been a lighthouse keeper for my life. And he's like, sure,
I believe you, Beth. I know nothing about lighthouses. Is this a surprise?
You know what? No, you're right. That's my bad.
Describing it's like a melted light bulb. It looks like a melted ice cream cone almost, but then it's where the ice cream is. It's like a spiral, and it looks like an eye almost, which is a running theme in this book. Clearly, spirals and eyes kind of synonymous. In fact, one of the boys says, "It's looking at us." So Kiri and Mitsuo and the boy run down because they're like, "Oh shoot, it's gonna be dusk. The light's gonna turn on. We're gonna be melted because it's the glass in the lighthouse has clearly been melted." One of the boys doesn't make it. He gets burnt to crisp. Mitsuo and Kiri barely make it. That's chapter 9.
I do think it's important to note that the skeletons you mentioned are crispy skeletons. That
crispy.
Kiri doesn't quite put together why the skeletons are crispy in there until she gets to the top and realizes this light or this casing for the light has melted, and that's why it has gotten so hot that it can melt glass, and that's why she's like, we gotta get out of here, let's go. And then that kid doesn't make it. Mitsuo makes it, but the other kid doesn't. He's a classic red shirt. Who even knows his name?
Doesn't even get a name.
Yeah, just kid.
Boy number 3. 9 compared to 13 is child's play. So I'm giving 13 to Yen.
All right, Yen, what happened in 13?
After a hurricane hits the town, Kiri and her family are forced to move into basically assigned housing for people who lost their homes during the hurricane. And it's this shed or this long row of houses that Mitsuo says is haunted. And the family really doesn't want to live there. And it's really pretty worn down. And they find other people who are living there. There's a pair of squatters. And there's also Mr. Wakabayashi, who's a very clear-faced, handsome gentleman who keeps checking in on the family, seeing how they're doing, and they're hearing strange noises. We, the readers, know there's a hole in the wall and somebody's looking at them. We eventually see the squatters, and we discover that they are covered in what look like almost thorns, spiral thorns.
Spiral warts.
Spiral warts. There's an older woman taking care of her son. Her son passes away. But when they go back to the house, Kiri sees him, but we never see him.
Thank God.
We only see what's left behind after he leaves, which is that there's a floor full of holes.
Oh.
And Mr. Wakabayashi keeps asking, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me what you saw. Tell me what you saw. And Kiri's like, no, I don't want to do that. Another hurricane hits.
Wakabayashi is what I'll say.
Yeah, big time.
Thanks, Nat. Thank you. We discover that Mr. Wakabayashi is the person who's been peeking on them. A peeping Tom, real creep, hate him. And during the hurricane, a second hurricane that's ripping through the town, Kiri is thinking of going outside to try and find help for her father, who the warts are becoming quite debilitating. But before she can, the wall caves in where the hole in the wall was, where Mr. Wakabayashi was watching them from. And out comes this terrible spiraled beast, where we saw on the woman, the thorns were like maybe an inch or 2 inches. On Mr. Wakabayashi, they're almost like a foot long. They're
like snakes, worms coming out of every
You can see them moving. You can imagine them moving, and they come after he comes after Kiri because he's obsessed with Kiri. But before he can reach her, thanks to the hurricane, a stake goes right through his neck. And the hurricane passes.
A wonderful schlup.
Wonderful. Oh, actually, it's a skoosh.
Yeah, I was like, it's a skoosh.
Can I just say what I really appreciated about this manga? I assume it's like the original translation we're reading. Like in other mangas we've read, they don't translate the sound effects. Sometimes they leave it in the Japanese kanji. But this one, they translated the sound effects, which I really appreciate. We love some onomatopoeias.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, Nat, we have also talked about whether that's like authentic.
I know. But
I prefer the kanji.
okay, for sake of me who can't read Japanese, I do like the
I can't read Japanese. I just have a better imagination.
Well, okay. All right. Excellent
Break it up,
recap.
boys. Break it up.
Excellent recap from both of you. So with these 3 chapters that we've read, I love the words that you had here. I think they're really descriptive of what you're looking at. But let's go back to Nat's final word, which is, why are these people not leaving this town?
Tell me why, Beth. Why?
Well, okay. Think about it this way. Like, how many horrific events have you witnessed in your lifetime?
On this scale?
Nat, you've never seen a man coiled into a tub?
Sorry, you're right.
This is very much like a frog boiling in water, right? Like, yes, Kiri and we, the readers, are seeing all of this happen. But to Joe Schmo, who lives in the town, like that kid who's like, I just want to check out this lighthouse. That's cool. Like, he has no idea what is happening or the scale of this. Like, the fact that Kiri is witnessing it, sure. Like, the question of why is she not leaving town is a great one, which there are answers to. But it's also, this is something beyond their grasp. Like, how do you even reconcile that what you saw is what you saw? My God, they're so horrific.
But I will say that's actually why I really like Kiri as a protagonist of the 3 chapters we read, which is that she's actually a fairly sensible person.
Yes.
Right. I think that's one of the most frustrating things about horror very often is watching a character do something and you're like, why would you do that? And you're doing that with Mitsuo and you're doing that with other characters.
Even with the group of men that first go up into the lighthouse, like, why?
Fools.
Yeah. Fools.
But with Kiri, we're like, oh, okay, I totally understand why she's doing what she's doing. So just on a storytelling level, we just connect with her very easily because we want her to survive. And she also wants to survive, which is not the case very often for a horror protagonist. You can't tell that they want to survive based on the action they take.
She is also pretty aware of things that are going on that are not okay. You know, when she's witnessing in chapter 13 these weird growths, she's like, I don't know what this is. I don't want to talk about it. This is very strange. And then suddenly those warts, they call them, start appearing on their fingers and on their toes. And they're like, oh my God, we got what they have, thinking this is just some kind of parasite or something that exists in this row house. And then they're victim to their circumstance, right? They lost their home. They don't have anywhere else to go. There's currently a hurricane happening. How are they supposed to get out? The town is actively forcing them to stay, is another part of this, is that this is a spiral. Spirals circle downward. They don't, in this book in particular, they don't circle out to get you out of there faster. They circle you deeper and deeper and deeper until you've lost all semblance of who you are, what you are, aside from spiral.
So the thing I'm actually most surprised by reading this is that I didn't know how, I guess, almost anthology Uzumaki is like. I didn't know how sort of discrete the chapters are because there's definitely stuff we missed in the middle.
Right.
But Nat, I don't know if you felt the same way, but these were actually very understandable and comprehensible without going through the stuff in between, which isn't the case for a lot of other stuff we've read, especially for horror stuff where there's sort of that build. I do get there is escalation within here, but it's not like I couldn't read this without reading the rest.
The chapters didn't end in cliffhangers. They actually ended in very kind of neat resolutions almost.
And I think that points to what Beth is talking about like how the town, this anthology style is allowing Junji Ito to be like, pick up on this aspect of the town. And here's how this aspect of the town is forcing them in and doing some slow horrors to them.
I think it also allows Junji Ito and the story to maintain interest in something that could be fairly one note. I think this idea of a town haunted by a spiral, you're like, okay, that sounds kind of stupid. And then as you're reading, you really see the depths of which this starts to go, is that chapter 1 is very much body horror. The end of chapter 1 is disgusting and horrific. And at the same time, the reveal in chapter 9 is disgusting and horrific in a completely different way. This is an architectural horror. This is not a monster that's chasing them. This is not a serial killer. This is not the insides of them becoming outsides of them. This is something completely different. And additionally, in chapter 13, yes, there's this grotesque creature that emerges, or this disease that shows up, but what is actually the most horrific thing about chapter 13?
Is that Mr. Wakabayashi's a creep.
That guy peeping Tom looking at Curious.
Yeah, he's a creep. He's literally creeping and becomes a creep. It's the horror of this dude that is enhanced throughout all of this. We go back to, this idea of Shuichi's dad being obsessed with spirals, and seeing all that goes is that it starts as this observation. It starts as this him staring at this weird snail shell, and then it goes to him collecting things with spirals, so surrounding himself with them. Those are then removed, and then he has to manufacture spirals in the objects around him until he realizes he can embody them. And so it's this difference in the way that Junji Ito is touching on horror, to say horror is not just this thing that is inside you. It's not just this thing that's outside of you. It can be anywhere and anything. The horror of man, the horror of this particular object, the horror of this symbol, the horror of what our own instincts and motivations can do. All of that is things that he can do with this anthology style work, is that he can explore horror in a huge variety of ways.
I want to ask you both, what actually is the most upsetting aspect of the things we read today? Like, whether it's a page or an idea, what is the thing that you're like, about?
For me, I think the most inducing
Perfect
page
noise.
for me was the page when we see the face of Mr. Wakabayashi, just a full-on frontal face with all the spirals coming out of his face, the eye sockets out of the top
This
of
is
the
when
nose.
he's rising from the rubble, right?
Yeah, all the teeth are spirals.
422.
It's just like, page 422. It's just there, and it's horrible.
Yeah, his eyes have been replaced with these spiraled horns. His teeth are replaced with spirals. His nose has a spiral coming out. His hands have like every surface of his body is protruded by these disgusting spirals.
And then on the next page, you see kind of him crawling on the floor, and he kind of just looks like a deformed hedgehog.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's kind of cute.
Oh, no.
Agree to disagree. Part of like why he looks so horrifying also, and also like the kind of the irony that Junji Ito's working on, is that Mr. Wakabayashi until this point is the most wrinkled free guy in the entire book.
Right, we said
Like really when I saw
clear-faced,
him,
right? Yeah.
I was like, this man is clear faced. This man is pale as hell.
Yep. Yeah. He's got a skincare routine and he's sticking to it, is what it looks like to me.
And then of course that's the thing that gets disrupted about him the most through this transformation. I think actually the thing that I was the most unnerved by was outside of chapter 1's opening the tub. That is just unbelievable. But I think it's Kiri going up the spiral of the lighthouse.
Yeah.
I think that is such an unnerving section without actually anything explicitly visually terrible on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's really just her going up and up and up. And you're realizing, oh shit, she's in a spiral now too.
I actually think that the reveal, quote unquote, the reveal of that was actually like not as scary as you think it's going to be. Like you definitely come up with way more scarier things in your head than what actually ends up being on the page.
I actually almost felt some relief when we saw the eyeball, because I was like, oh, okay, at least it's not a human body contorted. But my worst things are body horror, but I also think like really the horror, maybe the scary page is when she sees the bodies.
Yeah.
We've already actually peaked in terms of scariness when she sees the charred bodies.
Yeah, and that also is given to us with like a full splash page, a full image. It's pretty well rendered.
Yeah.
We really see the char on those. And I think, but I would agree. I think there is a sense of relief when you do see the horror thing, meaning like the light or the eyeball at the top of the lighthouse. To me, it's the dread of Kiri running and running and running and running. And she's like huffing and puffing, and she's like, this is endless. This keeps going. How big is this lighthouse? And she's spiraling through there. And yeah, I think the way that the paneling is that it really ramps up the tension. It really gives you that dread. It gives you that doom to feel like, oh God, what's gonna happen? And this eternal sense of like, I don't want to read, but I have to
Yes.
sensation. Even for not a podcast, like when you're reading this, the experience is, I don't want to turn this page, but if I don't, it's going to be worse in my head. There's this sensation of your imagination being worse, and then sometimes he surprises you, and actually what Junji Ito makes is way worse than what your brain is telling you.
And so let's bring that back to Nat's question of why don't the people leave the town? I think the question also is why do we keep reading? And that's what Beth is saying, right? The imagination is so much worse. If anything, we are stupider than the townspeople because we have the option to close the book and go away.
Of the things that we read as a group, I think actually the scariest thing is the second page.
In the field.
Yes, the spiral obsession, the strange event that took place here. There's like this opening image, and then it's Kiri standing in this field of ferns and fiddle and being surrounded and trapped by these spirals that are already intrinsically in her environment. And to me, because I've read the whole book and because I really love this book, this is far more upsetting and far more disturbing. Like, I have goosebumps right now thinking about what that sensation is. Because for me, when I first read this, I'm not going to give away content of what happens, but ultimately the type of resolution you're expecting is very different than what actually occurs at the end of this book. And I read this while I was traveling. And so I read this alone in a hotel room at night as when I finished it. So I read a lot of it during the day and on airplanes where people could see the horrific things I was reading. But I finished it and I closed the book. And I remember distinctly emerging from this reading experience feeling so scared and uncomfortable and looking around my environment and seeing all of these places where spirals exist naturally, just in our environments. I'm looking right now at my desk. I'm looking at your environments. Like, they are everywhere. And this idea of that and seeing it on this opening set of pages is so disturbing to me. To go back to why don't they leave? They can't. They try. There are multiple instances where that thought occurs to more than one character. And the thing that is scary to me about standing in this field full of spirals is you cannot escape nature. You cannot escape this thing that already exists in the world.
Just to put a name to it, right? It's the golden ratio. The golden ratio occurs in nature and forms as a spiral, manifests as a spiral.
Fibonacci
yes,
sequence.
The Fibonacci,
yeah.
The Fibonacci sequence, yes.
Can I return to the page that Yen brought up, which was, I think it's page 284, which is the page where we get the full page spread of the skeletons.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Nat. I was dying to talk about this page, but you go first.
I just want to say, I mean, again, this is like, belies my very limited exposure to comics and my reference points. But Beth, correct me if I'm wrong. This has a lot of affinity with Charles Burns' Black Hole in terms of the density of mark making and kind of what we were talking about in the episode about how like things are so dense. There's so many marks, black and white, right? Black marks. But then there's still so much clarity over what we're seeing. And with this crazy perspective, right? We're looking down a spiral staircase. There's the foreground of this skeleton, and then there's the background with Kiri just coming around the bend, and then there is these crazy spirals all over the walls, the stairs, and despite the incredible density, we still can see all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. There is certainly a relationship between the way that these two cartoonists are thinking about visual density on the page. And like we talked about in a little briefly of like the chapter 1 is that Junji Ito is incredibly hatched. It's incredibly realistic. There's a lot of texture everywhere, but not so much that you can't tell what's going on. He's always paying attention to clarity first, and then content and texture second. But this is also a good example of somewhere where with mangaka art assistants can come in, is that Junji Ito probably lays out this page. He likely draws the character and kind of the skeletons, and maybe goes in a bit for what he wants a section to look like, and then we'll pass it off to an assistant to kind of take over the texture and the spirals or things like that to be like, this is what I want the vibe to be, help fill this in. And then at the conclusion of their work, he'll take the page back and add any final details or final touches to make sure that it's the way that he wants it to be.
Shout out to assistants.
I want to pick up on something Nat just said about Charles Burns. And do you know, like, if they were making this work simultaneously across the globe and just ending up, because Black Hole also has horrible spirals.
Yes.
Black Hole also has a disease that spreads and reveals inner corruption, or is perceived to reveal inner corruption, except here it actually does.
So if we recall, the original issues of Black Hole, also sitting above me, were 12 issues. They were also published one chapter at a time from 1995 till 2004. So these were happening simultaneously. Now, the English translation of Uzumaki did not occur or did not happen until like the early 2000s, so like early aughts. But these two people were making these works across the globe from each other at the same time. I think that that's really important. And I also am positioning myself in this space on this podcast to be like, I'm the horror guy of like Charles Burns. You know, we're looking at Junji Ito. And Uzumaki is not Junji Ito's first book either. He has other works prior to Uzumaki. Uzumaki is just like one of his biggest and most well-known. There's also, if you are interested in something equally horrific, there is recently an anime version of Uzumaki that's actually fairly decent. I've watched a few episodes of it. The animation itself dips off after the first episode, so I was kind of like, eh. But the way that they're crafting the narrative is extremely close to the book.
I just can't imagine how animation could sustain the density of what Nat was saying of the mark making here, because so much of the horror comes from the detail, and so for a moving frame to try and communicate that, I just simply can't. I can't visualize it.
The horror is in the saturation, right? Of like just the spirals. Yeah. Yeah,
because it's also, you know, we do get like, especially in this chapter of the Black Lighthouse, we do get areas of heavy full spot blacks, right? Like get this really beautiful image on 268. That's the first page after the chapter title, where the landscape of the lighthouse itself is a full spot black, as well as like the rocks that the lighthouse is perched on are spot blacks. But then when you look closer, the water is like a light gray fill with some lines and texture on it. And then the sky is this like heavily hatched mark making to like indicate kind of this like swirling heat light of the lighthouse going around. But it's rare that we get these solid spot blacks. It is mostly a density of texture, a density of line. Every now and then we get a little, you know, halftone or a zipatone. We get like a gray fill that's happening in here, but it's pretty rare that we're just getting solid spot blacks.
Can I point out another panel that I think is an incredible work of art, which is on, I can't make a page number. I think it would be 296 when boy number 3, unnamed boy, goes up in flames.
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
Yes, that is 296 for me.
I'm so surprised you want to go back to that, Nat.
It's beautiful.
I actually don't think that looks very scary, or, you know, for me, it's not that bad. I think it's incredible how it's depicted. It's not easy to show that sense of really being engulfed, dissolving in a static image, but he does it.
Immolated. Like it is shocking because one of the things that's happening here, if you look very closely, there are no horizontal lines.
Ooh.
They are only vertical lines to create that heat, that swell. So he's creating a horizontal effect to give us the staircase and the brickwork, but it is all tiny vertical lines to bring that heat, to move it up and to imitate that motion, which I think is also like, who thinks of that? Like, amazing. Like the easy option is just line, there's your stairs, right? As opposed to to like draw a horizontal line.
This is again going back to why I kind of mentioned it animated, because to me, this is already animated.
I know.
These panels are already in motion.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting about the anime is that if you go back to like our skeleton page where we're seeing the spirals emerge on the staircases, then you see this and it's like those spirals are moving. It adds this like extra little bit of like, yes, this is a still image, but it feels very active and it feels like motion. But in the anime, it's like those are moving ever so slightly to like be spiraling, which is like, what?
Riffing off that and returning to what we were talking about earlier about comic book writers who kind of go meta and write themselves into works or their own issues into works. Do we know if Junji Ito is okay?
There's a really great meme of Miyazaki and Junji Ito, and Miyazaki is like super depressed, dark in his personality, and Junji Ito is like very lighthearted, giggly, cat ears kind of dude. He's like, "Tee, I'm Junji Ito." And Miyazaki's like smoking like 60 cigarettes, like, ugh, life is dark.
He's like, making art is the worst thing a person can do, and it is all I do. And Junji Ito is like, I'm drawing a circle. And it's going in.
And actually, Junji Ito has a book that's about his cats that's really delightful. It's still spooky because he can't help himself, but it's like, it's so dumb. It's like, it's just called Cat Diaries. So yeah, he's okay. He's great.
He's okay.
He's
Okay, that's
it.
good to know.
There's an afterward chapter that I debated having you guys read that stars Junji Ito about the making of this. And it's in manga form. So it's like a couple of pages at the very, very end.
Fascinating. So we were talking a little bit about how this work is in conversation with Charles Burns. I do want to quickly touch on a name we already brought up, which is H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And how this work is in conversation with that, right? Because there's so many similarities. And I think that's Nat's question of like, why aren't they leaving? Didn't even occur to me because I've read H.P. Lovecraft and so many of those stories are exactly this, but it's like instead of Japan, it's like Rhode Island or it's Massachusetts. A visitor goes to the town and then is horrified by the town and everyone there is like, what are you scared about? This is what it is. This is life. The worst thing you could ever see, that's a Tuesday.
Right.
Amazing.
Right.
Amazing. I love that. There's so much about the Eldritch horror and H.P. Lovecraft that Junji Ito is pulling from and really thinking about that and trying to rationalize these horrible things. And I think Kiri is also in that place of she's not really rationalizing them, but she's approaching them logically to be like, how is this possible? I mean, Shuichi also brings it up as he mentions in the first chapter, there's like a stream that has these like little whirlpools forming.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't you notice how this is like this? And she's like, I never really thought of that.
On this note of rationalization, I think that's such a great point because the whole meme about H.P. Lovecraft is he'll be like, and then they saw the monster and it is so horrible. I could not describe it to you or else you would go insane. And it's like, Mr. Lovecraft, that's kind of your job. Describe it.
Yeah.
But then you think about our reaction to the reveal of Shuichi's father, which is we both guessed what it would be. We both had a vision of what it could be. And we're like, how horrible could it be? And we got there and we were like, oh, it's so much worse than we could imagine. Right?
Yeah.
And there's just the fact that Junji Ito is working in a visual medium makes him work so much harder than H.P. Lovecraft and brings it to another level.
Because Junji Ito can't just have, a blank page that says, and it was so bad.
and it was so scary that when I tried drawing it, I got scared and I stopped.
I mean, he could try that, but I also think that that's one of the things it's horrible, but it's also really magical is that somehow Junji Ito continues to make things that are beyond disturbing, that are beyond what you could possibly imagine as bad. And ups the ante of himself too. Is like each of his subsequent works, you're like, okay, well, I read Uzumaki, so it's gonna be fine. And then you're like, oh my god, close the next book. I do want to know, I'm so sorry, I missed these producer notes that came in, is that the early 2000s English translation of Uzumaki changed both the page and panel direction into left to right.
Boo, boo.
That's too far.
That is too far. Like, so them translating and adjusting the sound effects, I feel like I really do appreciate them in English in this particular work because the like squelching noises that Junji Ito has made are really specific. Sometimes I think there's maybe too many, but I appreciate that. But changing somebody's panel order and page turns is like, that's a crime against nature, honestly.
Yeah. Jailable.
It is. Yeah, straight to jail.
Can I speak on this directional thing also?
Yes, of course.
Which is that the spirals are also directional.
Yes.
So to invert the whole page is just really a crime. That's really just
So
unacceptable.
bad.
And so much of this comic is about the direction, the unnerving direction in which it moves.
And I think on top of that, too, that Junji Ito, even though jump scares in comics are really unlikely and really difficult to pull off, Junji Ito's page turns are masterful. They are so masterful. The one that we highlighted through this when we turned to see the tub, that page turn is unbelievable. The fact that it is this buildup, this looming dread, and you're like, I know there's a body in there, and then you turn it and see it, and it is still like
there's a body
jump
in
scare.
there.
Yeah,
there's a body in there. I've got a question for both of you, and it's a little facile, but entertain me.
Okay.
If you had to get a panel from Uzumaki tattooed onto your body, which panel would it be? And if you would be like, not that panel, what panel is that?
of what we read, yeah.
Of what we read.
Because there are actually a lot of Uzumaki tattoos of a specific panel.
From what we've read?
Oh.
No, not from what we read, but
It's the tub, isn't it?
It's not the tub.
And all of those people are in prison.
No, there's t-shirts too. It's the girl with like half her head is open and spiraled and her eyeballs in the center. That's
Yes.
from this. So
Okay, that's the one I know.
that is certainly a common tattoo and t-shirt. It's at Hot Topic, I think. It's the
Insane.
sponsor of the show. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll go first since I asked the question. I think it's page 272. I don't like the men in it because I know what happens to them. But I love that picture of the lighthouse. I love that panel of the lighthouse.
Oh, yeah.
It's Van Gogh's Starry Night, right? The swirls in the background. The sky just looks so beautiful and horrible. I love the imagery of the lighthouse in this chapter. I think it's just so evocative, especially that page that Beth already broke down with the wonderful hatchings and the way the light spreads outwards. Anyone else want to go?
I really like in chapter 1, the page 4, I think. The one is just like it's a full page spread of Kiri in color, which I really appreciate because you know how much I like color and how much I missed color in reading other mangas. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that she has beautiful red hair and, you know, in this beautiful just portrait of Kiri.
I think I would do a full back piece of page
the location.
page 22, which is Mr. Saito in his room surrounded by his spiral objects.
Beautiful page. That's a beautiful page.
I mean, truly, it is a beautiful page. I
is.
don't know that I would actually get that tattooed to my body, but I thought it would be a funny haha of like, this is like a really great, gigantic. I love this illustration. I think it is so stunning how many different types of spirals they put in here. We have little hints to events that happen later on in the stories. If you look carefully to the bottom right, kind of behind his back, there's like a shell with little spiked horns coming out as like a hint to what we read in chapter 13. There's snail shells in here, which I already mentioned as part of it, but there's springs, there's coils, there's like helixes, there's galaxies, there's like all of these other various imagery that I think are just really beautifully done and an incredibly striking image. So
When I saw this panel, the first thing that came to my mind was Yayoi Kusama and like her obsession with polka dots.
yes, it is like that. Maybe
Yeah.
she's like that, but with spirals.
Yeah.
I also think it would just be really funny to do the tub tattoo. That would be funny.
I was going to say that's the one I don't want.
I wouldn't mind it. You're not the one who has to look at it if it's on your body.
No, but I just don't like what it implies. Like, I just don't like I'm talking specifically the one where he's in the tub and his eyes are dark on page 25.
Oh.
I'm not talking about the tub. I'm talking about him sitting in the bathtub. him nude in the bathtub, looking the most serious a man has ever looked while getting a good soak in.
Yeah,
A good
hell
spiral
yeah.
soak.
I also think it would be kind of sick to get the peeping eyeball on like a
from
part of your
13.
body as if
Yeah.
someone was peeping out of your body. I think that would be kind of cool as like a tattoo.
Nat, do you have your no tattoo? Your I will not get that one?
Every other panel in this comic. I mean, what else do I
Like
need
the
to
whole
say?
thing. The whole thing, yeah. Get all 600 plus pages tattooed. I was going to say, I think that we're probably at a point where we want to talk about, like, if you like blank, then you'll like Uzumaki. And if you like Uzumaki, then you'll like blank references.
I guess in my case, if you hate blank, you'll hate Uzumaki.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to start with if you like The Fly, the movie, I think you would like Uzumaki.
I think I have a similar answer. It's not Cronenberg, it's Lynch. I think if you like Twin Peaks, you would like Uzumaki.
Interesting.
And Nat, if you hate...
I don't know, because I mean, you know, I don't consume horror anyway in my general life. So I'm just trying to think where I could.
Well, it doesn't have to be horror, right? Like it could be music related, it could be like an album that's kind of spooky, or it could be like thinking about the density of image.
I don't think this is as scary at all, but I think there's something about this idea of like a small town and things are going increasingly wrong. I think if you like Stranger Things, definitely there's something there, with the connection to this small town and all the things that are going wrong. Yeah.
Well, and Stranger Things has cosmic horror in it. Like it has eldritch horror. So yeah, definitely. Okay.
Not as much body horror, right? I would say.
No. They're children. Although that doesn't save anybody in this book.
No, not boy number 3. Poor boy number 3.
R.I.P. boy number 3.
Okay, so if you like Uzumaki, then maybe
You start us off, Beth. What's another comic, and other than Tender, of course, goes without being said.
I mean, Tender is a really good option. Yeah, I mean, all of his other stuff, I recommend. But I think I would steer people towards something a little bit different. M. Carroll's book, Through the Woods, is a horror anthology of comics that have some body horror, some kind of like haunted house horror feeling, like gothic horror feelings, and is in full color. And this is a Canadian cartoonist. They approach horror in a little bit of a different way. It's a little more folksy, or a little bit more like folklore.
I'm going to give my answer, and I think this is going to make Beth, hopefully it'll make Beth happy, because I read it with Beth. It is indeed From Hell by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. That's the comic book that I think of that generated the most dread in me.
Ugh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've read a comic like From Hell that has created that much dread in me. I think the comic that I've read a little bit about, but I honestly didn't like it enough to really recommend it, would be Providence, which is Alan Moore's take on the H.P. Lovecraft mythology. Yeah. I don't think it really landed for me. I think From Hell really lands because it does what I think Junji Ito does, which is pulls back sometimes, and then because it pulls back, you are even more upset and you're even more disturbed.
Yeah, Spirit of Evil, I think, is a big deal. I mean, honestly, too, like if you like Stephen King's books, I think specifically It would be a good reference too, to like be something that you would read before going to Uzumaki if you like It. I know we're going backwards, but just thinking about it, From Hell makes me think of the Spirit of Evil, which is so hauntingly spooky that it could be anyone. I really don't care for that at all. And also, I love it. Nat, will you keep reading Uzumaki?
No. What for? Why would I put myself through this voluntarily?
Don't you feel a little bit curious about how this wraps up? And like, do they escape?
No.
Do they leave?
I'm
Nothing.
Good.
No,
I think they all deserve to die.
Even Kiri?
Even Kiri, I said it.
We can't release this episode. This episode is going in the vault. Going into the Comic Sans vault.
I hope you're ready to be canceled. Jeez.
I stand by my decision. I will not keep reading.
All right, sounds good. Yen, will you keep reading Uzumaki?
Oh, absolutely. This is really my jam.
I thought you were totally so scared.
Yeah, even before bed. I mean,
no, I just won't read it before bed. But
right.
Okay.
Even though I'm scared,
Good.
I'm still gonna weed.
Scared. Yeah, you should still weed if you're scared.
Heavy, everybody. This episode's definitely going in the vault.
I'm a grown man.
I am a grown man, and I want to read Uzumaki.
I hope you do, because I would really appreciate a text or an email after you finish, because that's just the kind of person that I am.
No, Beth, I'll do you one better than a text or an email. I'll just send you like a 30-second voice note of me going, no! Why would he do this?
Honestly, I have a friend who was live texting me their reading of my book, and I was really enjoying, because I obviously know what's going to happen. So it was really amusing. I also would appreciate
as
that.
I was reading it yesterday, I audibly said, and I was alone, I audibly said, no!
And you will also say that when reading Uzumaki.
Oh, you mean when I don't read Uzumaki?
Oh, sorry. To be clear, when I said I'm going to read Uzumaki, I'm going to be reading it next to you, and I'll just be describing it to you panel by panel. Look, Nat, you're not going to believe what he did here with the spiral. Nat, trust me, you won't believe what this spiral does.
I believe.
I think, Nat, it's very possible that despite your attempts to avoid, it might seep in.
Unfortunately, I spend a lot of time with Yen outside of this podcast. I don't know why.
Yeah, why don't you leave?
Yeah, exactly. Why can't This is my horror story. You are my
Yeah,
spiral.
Nat, same question back at you. Why don't you leave?
One day they're going to be doing podcast sans and they're going to listen to this podcast
Podcast said.
and they're going to be like, yeah, I
Wow.
don't get why he doesn't leave. Hyphenated.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so delighted. Nat, I hope that you do get some sleep after
I
this
think I'll be
terrifying
okay.
read.
I think I'll be
you will
okay.
too.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
there
think
was
all.
actually something I wanted to say. I want you to know, Beth, that you don't know right now, which is that the last episode Nat and I did was the beautiful skip by Molly Mendoza. And this is just the biggest jump between
And Beth,
tones.
I have never loved a comic as much as I loved this. This was my gem. See, so if now you understand why I don't like Uzumaki, because this is what I like.
Honestly, Skip is amazing, and I love Molly Mendoza. She's such a sweetheart.
You
I
know
got
her
to do a
personally?
reading. Yeah, I got to do a reading with her in Portland, and she visited my class this past
Beth.
semester.
Beth, we gotta get her on the show.
Do you want me to text her?
Beth, we have to get Junji Ito on the show.
No.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Beth. The last thing to do is to give you a little tease of what Nat's going to be reading next episode.
Which is our last episode of season 3.
And so I'm going to say, if you like the works of Greta Gerwig, so that's Lady Bird, Little Women, or, to be more direct, if you like the work of Jillian and Mariko Tamaki.
Ooh.
Oh my god.
I do. I did enjoy this
Are
one.
you
Familiar
reading-
names, Nat?
Are you reading what I think you're reading?
I believe we are reading.
Okay,
what you
I'll
think
take off
we're
my
reading.
headphones and you can ask again right now. Hang on.
Are you reading Roaming?
We are reading Roaming.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Nat, you can go back.
Okay, I'm back. I missed it. See, it's really important that I maintain my ignorance.
Would like to thank Beth once again for coming on the show. Thank you, Beth. Please come
Thank
back again with
you.
something even more horrifying.
No, do not.
Wouldn't it be fun though if now that I have a reputation for being horrifying, if I brought something that was really lovely?
Yeah, bring something Skip-esque the next time you're here.
Deal.
I would love that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Just
Thank
for
you.
you, Nat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. This has been Comic Sans. We'll see you on the next page.
Say it with me, Beth. See ya.
See ya.
We'll get it the next time.
No, see ya.
See ya. Thanks for listening to Comic Sans. This is an Andas Productions podcast hosted by Mal Yente and Nathaniel Ma and produced by Scott Lee Chua and Roshan Singh Sambi. This episode was audio edited by Maddie Searle, video edited by Kit Ling Leong, and transcribed by Danielle Ann Espinosa. Our cover art and motion graphic animations are by Konechny Studio, Mariana Rudakova. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review Comic Sans. And while you're at it, follow us on social media at Comic Sans Pod. Links are in the description below.